We're on the air. We're on the air. Author Interview Radio brings you the hottest authors publishing on the planet today. Listen in on these private conversations. Now, here's your host. You are on the air.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and I'm really excited to introduce today's guest, Henry Devries. He is a marketing scientist, and he's an expert on typing and talking, and he helps people maximize their revenues by writing books and making speeches. He speaks to thousands of service professionals each year, teaching them proven tactics that attract high-paying clients. His goal is to win the Nobel Prize in marketing. So today, I really am going to tap into Henry's expertise, everyone, and he's going to give us some really concrete ideas about stories and storytelling and marketing. And he's also the author of Persuade with Stories. So welcome, Henry.
Thank you, Tammy. It's so good to be here to help people understand how they can have another tool in their toolkit, storytelling that persuades.
I think that you are somebody that my audience will really love, because I work with people who are authors and they always come back to me after they've written that book. Okay, now what? And I think that you have a lot of the now what factor. And it's interesting to me because so many people, the whole reason they wrote a book in the first place is they want to be speakers and they want to share their big message and big mission, but they get stuck in this storytelling phase of it because they don't know what stories to tell. So you say that there are 8 great stories that humans are hardwired to tell. So let's go ahead and dig right into that.
Okay, so the 8 great stories that humans are hardwired for, the stories that we not only want to hear, we need to hear these stories. They're life-affirming, they help us with our lives. So it's the overcoming the monster story. So think Jaws, Dracula, any things like this. This also applies to business books. I've helped write over 300 business books. And if it's a problem solution book with a huge problem, that's a monster story. The next one is the underdog story. The rags to riches, David versus Goliath. It's the little person versus the big world. So if you're telling one of these stories, then you're telling the underdog story. Moneyball by Michael Lewis. I'm a baseball nut. So that's about the Oakland A's being the underdog. How can they compete with the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox, the rich teams of the world? There's a comedy story and there's a tragedy story. These are 2 stories, and it's not about being funny or sad. Tammy, any story can be funny or sad. This is about how the hero, the main character of the story, solves a problem. If they solve it with a wacky idea, comedy of errors, all's well that ends well in Shakespeare, a wacky idea and then a happy ending, that's a comedy. We're 2 lawyers in Washington, D.C., we're too busy to find romance. I know, wacky idea. We'll get dressed up and crash weddings on the weekends where women are there and they're looking for romance. So wedding crashers. Tragedy is you try to solve the problem by taking a shortcut against the laws of nature, economics, society, God. So think The Big Short, Too Big to Fail. In Shakespeare, it's Othello, Hamlet, Lear. It's The Godfather. It's, I'm a high school chemistry teacher and I have stage 4 cancer. I'm going to die and there's no money for my family for retirement. I know. I'll make meth in an RV in New Mexico. What could possibly go wrong? The tragedy, those are cautionary tales to warn us about not taking the shortcuts. There's a mystery story. If it's cracking the code, solving the riddle, unlocking the keys, if it's one of these stories, it's a mystery story. Now, we think Sherlock Holmes, we think Agatha Christie, we think CSI, but also in business, Who Moved My Cheese is a mystery story. So if you're writing a mystery story like that, there's a quest. This is where the main character is after a prize, some great gain, a treasure. Think Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark or the Holy Grail. My business book, bestseller from McGraw-Hill, How to Close a Deal Like Warren Buffett. That's a quest on how to be a deal maker like Warren Buffett. There's the redemption story, rebirth story, Phoenix Rising, comeback story. If you're telling this kind of story where something basically was dead and has come back. In literature, think A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens about Scrooge. So basically, Scrooge was dead and he was redeemed by three ghosts in the night. The eighth story is the escape story. You're in a normal place, you go to a crazy place, you get back to a normal place. So The Wizard of Oz is that type of story. Alice in Wonderland. Galaxy Quest, if you want a more modern reference about a sci-fi movie. It's also in business. I helped somebody write a book called The Prodigal Executive. And it's about executives who do well, and then they crash, and they have to get back on track. And how do they do that? One of my authors wrote a business book called Reignite, Margaret Reynolds. And that was about all these companies after the 2008 recession that had to reinvent themselves to survive. So they were in a good place. The recession was the crazy place. The growing again was the good place they returned to. So those are the 8 great stories. To recap: monster, underdog, comedy, tragedy, mystery, quest, rebirth, and escape.
So interestingly, all of those are really great ideas for stories. One of the things that I know many people run into is they're told to your message story. My question to all of that is, how do you know which story to tell to move yourself forward with whatever the business is or the reason you're telling this story? Because sometimes the mess doesn't match the message where you're going. Right. And so there you are revealing, and again, I see this a lot with people who've suffered some type of an abuse type story, and they're telling these awful stories of what happened to them, but then there's a disconnect with what they're doing now. So how do you choose out of those 8 types of stories that you're trying to tell to move forward if you are trying to speak for, let's say, business purposes or motivational purposes?
Right. So you use these stories to attract clients in different ways. You use them in speeches, you use them in your book, you use them in articles, you use them one-on-one when you've had a conversation. You don't start off telling a story, but after you know the person's goals and what they're doing right and what their roadblocks are, you can tell them a story about someone you helped who got from where they are to where you want to go. So the first thing we have to understand, 2 types of stories. There's client mess to success stories, and then there's your story. And I do that in the singular. I wrote a book called Defining You, and it's about how you define yourself when people ask questions. And there's a defining statement, there's a defining paragraph, then there's a defining story of what that is. But let's hold that off. Too many people, I find the big mistake they make is they're telling stories about themselves. If you want to attract clients, you need to tell stories about clients you've helped, where you've helped them go from mess to success. And actually, when you tell that story, the story reveals itself which one of the 8 stories it is. And do you tell it as a mystery, or do you tell it as a quest? Do you tell it as a rebirth story? So the story reveals itself. Now, Tammy, I get pushback from people who go, well, I do great things. I help people. These stories are about me. Oh, no. They're not about you if you want to attract more clients. They're about the clients. And the client is the main character of the story. And they have a dilemma, a problem, the recession of 2008. It might be government regulations. It might be a person or an entity. So there's a challenge they have to overcome. And then you are a third character, the mentor character, the voice of wisdom and experience. If it's Star Wars, your clients are Luke Skywalker, the problem is Darth Vader, and you are Yoda. Or if we want a more modern telling, if that reference is old, we have a new Star Wars movie coming up. Rey is the main character. The Galactic Empire and Kylo Ren, still the dilemma. And then Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker, who now sort of looks like Yoda, he is the mentor character in that. So you have an important role. Unless the hero goes to the mentor, they can't solve the problem. But they get credit for solving the problem.
The mentor gets credit for solving the problem?
The hero gets credit for solving the problem by listening to the voice of experience, the wisdom and experience of the mentor.
Okay.
And then there's an important thing you said about people not getting it. You need one more thing in the story, the moral of the story. You can't let the listener decide what the moral of the story is. You need to tell them. If you're telling, and these are true stories, I'm not saying you're making up fables like the tortoise and the hare, an Aesop fable that's been around for 3,000 years, which the moral of that story is slow and steady wins the race. It's also persistence triumphs in the end. These are the morals you want people to take away from that story. What is the moral you want people to take away from the story you're telling? Is it about a certain core value that drives the company? Like, we'll do whatever it takes to solve the client's problem? Or is it integrity means doing what we say? What is the moral you want people to take away?
So when you talk about it's like a formula for this. So are the 3 major characters in a story the hero, the nemesis, mentor?
Yes, and the one last piece is and the moral.
And the moral.
So it's an easy formula I teach business leaders in my workshops on. The story starts in the first sentence about the person you're talking about. And a nuance of it, you don't say, I remember, or I have. When you start saying I to start your story, the emphasis is on you. Really, you want the first sentence, the first name mentioned. Penny Reed is a special woman. Penny Reed was staring at a stack of unpaid bills on her kitchen table. She was in an 800 square foot apartment. It was a far cry from the 4,000 square foot home she shared with her ex-husband, who was also her employer, who also gave her all her work. No house, no employer, no work, and a stack of bills. Penny Reed is a special person. She said, I am going to earn $200,000 a year as a best-selling author and professional speaker. That's when I met Penny Reed. So that's how that story starts. And so it's about Penny Reed, but I enter in as the mentor character. and ask Penny some questions, help her do it. She did the hard work. It wasn't easy. She did the hard work. And that story ends with 2 years later, she presses a button on her QuickBooks P&L report, and it prints out gross profit for the year, $200,000. $100,000 from speaking, $100,000 from consulting. So the moral of that story is, when I tell it, is that I got her to make a phone call a day. Even before the book was written, she started making a phone call a day. And that one phone call a day changed her life.
Wow. Which, when you think about it, that's absolutely true. That one phone call a day could make a huge difference. So when you work with people, obviously I was looking at, you have written probably hundreds of books as both an author and a ghost writer. You've
Right.
helped people publish their books and become speakers. So today, because I like I said, I was reading all about your background, and it is like layer upon layer of experience. When you work with people, how do you work with them today?
Well, thank you for asking. I run a company called Indie Books International. I work with independent consultants who want to attract high-paying clients by marketing with a book and a speech. In fact, in the last decade, I've either been a ghostwriter, co-author, editor, coach on more than 300 business books, including my international bestseller that I mentioned, How to Close a Deal Like Warren Buffett. So I help them with the preparation of the book, the publishing of the book, the promotion. My saying is, the number one marketing tool for a consultant is a book. The number one marketing strategy is speaking. Authors leverage the books to get more speaking engagements. It's a dirty little secret, but more people are going to be impacted by you talking about the book than actually reading the book. And that's okay. People will come up to an author, Tammy, and they'll say, "Oh, Tammy, I have your book." And that's code for, I haven't read your book. It's on my nightstand. I'm going to get to it one day. So as an author, you know that. And it's okay. You get invited to speak because of the book, or you're able to leverage the book to get speaking engagements. I always say the book is the starting line, not the finish line. We never reach the finish line. It's the race to get high-paying clients. And the stories we put into the book, I say you need to tell when you're speaking. And if there's stories that weren't in the book but apply, you need to tell those stories in your speeches, because humans are hardwired for stories, and it's the stories that we remember.
So I'm with you 100%, because one of the books I actually wrote was called Beyond the Bestseller, because again, many people were thinking, oh, I've written this book, now what? So you're saying that your book can really help get you on stages. And a lot of my listeners are really interested in this aspect of it. And some people want to be what I would call paid speakers, meaning they want to get a big check to get up on a stage to speak. And then there are other people who are more like, well, I want to get on stages and get paid for my consulting and my product sales from speaking. What is your concept about getting a big paycheck to speak versus getting on stage and earning bigger paychecks from speaking and that book?
Right. Let me tell you the story of the wisdom of the 17-year-old Jack Devries, my son.
Okay.
So I had promised Jack to take a day off of work and take him to Disneyland. We live an hour from Disneyland. And we were going to take his brother, Jordan, was going to come with. And the night before we were to go, I got a frantic call from a CEO peer group chairman. He had a peer group of a dozen CEOs who met for breakfast. They always had a speaker. Their speaker had canceled because of illness. So he said, I know you're an author, Henry. Would you come in and speak? And I'll pay you an honorarium of $200. Now, Tammy, that's more honor than rarium. I accepted. And I told Jack and Jordan, I said, okay, we're going to drive through a fast food restaurant, have your devices. So eat all the fast food breakfast you want, play on the devices. And when I get out of this breakfast speech, we're going to then go to Disneyland. So when I made the speech, they actually gave me the check that day for $200. So I got in the car and I threw the check in the center console. And Jack picked it up. And Jack said, Dad, this check is for $200. And I said, yes, that's correct. Dad, you told me we were going to delay the trip to Disneyland because you were going to make $10,000 speaking today. I said, yes, that is also true. I know from the contacts I made in that room, I will write $10,000 worth of business. And Tammy, that did come to pass. Jack said, oh, and they paid you $200 to do that. It's the perfect crime. So I want your authors to commit the perfect crime. There are 16 different ways to commit the perfect crime. Most are stuck on a corporation booking you to come in, and an author who's an expert with a book speaks in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. I speak in the $5,000 to $10,000 range if I put on a keynote or do a workshop. When you get the full boat. And it's great. You get this check and you spent the day with them and you go on and life's good. But that's only one of the 16 ways. There are others. So here's one. I had an author named Henry Hutchison, and I helped him with a book. It was a mystery, The Dirty Little Secrets of Family Business. And he would speak to family business associations. And you have to know that family business in America is huge. This is a huge market. Well, there's this one association, and they said, well, Henry, it's so prestigious to speak for our organization. We don't pay speakers. Well, Henry Hutchison was Henry Devries trained. And he said, oh, I understand. Let me ask a question. Do you have an education budget? And they will say what these people said, an education budget, what's that? And Henry said, well, I understand you want me to come in and speak, but does it make sense for me to come in and get everybody excited on the topic and then leave town without giving them the instruction book? So if you would be willing to buy a copy using your education training budget, a copy for everybody in attendance, and my $20 book, I'll discount to $15. If you'd be willing to buy a copy for everybody, then I'd be willing to waive my $5,000 speaking fee. Well, they didn't pause for dignity. They said yes right away. Now, I left something out of the story. There were 1,000 people at the event. They bought 1,000 books. It cost Henry $5 per book. He sold them for $15. So he put $10,000 cash in his pocket that day to speak. And to 1,000 people, he had the best brochure, business card, website in their hands that he could ever produce. Now, let's look behind the scenes at the event. These people, they were like score, because the people who put on the event, who pay speaker honorariums, the education budget is somebody else's budget. They got the $15,000 from somebody else's budget. And they said, hey, we got you $20,000 worth of training materials for $15,000. And they went to their boss and said, hey, we got $25,000 worth of value here for $15,000. good job, faithful steward. They were like, so they were all happy. Henry's happy. So the moral of the story is the magic phrase. Does it make sense to have me come speak to your organization, get them all excited on the topic, and then leave town without giving them the instruction book? I train my authors to say that. I say that. Even if you're being paid the $5,000 to $10,000, a lot of times you'll up what you make because people will say, oh, well, yes, we should get the books too. And a lot of times they're pulling it from someone else's budget. So there's an example.
That is a phenomenal example. And you just gave, I would say, listening to our conversation right there, that's a piece of gold right there. And I highly recommend everybody go back and re-listen to what Henry just said, because that is what I would call digital gold right there. That's money in the bank, what you just shared about how to talk to people when they're telling you that they don't want to pay for that. And you just twisted it just by knowing a little bit about, hey, an education budget. So to me, that's solid gold. That's really great information, Henry. You're making me want to work with you.
Tammy, do you want another example?
Yes, I want more.
Okay. Well, I had an author named Lisa, and Lisa was very energetic and helped people in the IT industry. And before she wrote a book, I had her put together an information product where she interviewed 20 executives in the information industry, got their permission that she could use the recordings, transcribed the recordings, had an offer for $247. And she sold it, online or through other means. Well, then there was this big conference coming up in San Diego at the Hotel Del Coronado. Beautiful Victorian historic building, really high-end conferences there. This was for IT executives, her perfect fit, target-rich audience. They wanted to charge her $5,000 to attend as a sponsor. That was her only way in. And she didn't have $5,000. And I said, even if you did, you shouldn't spend it. Call them up and offer to do a fundraiser for them. And they're going to say, a fundraiser? What's that? And you're going to say, well, I have this information product. It sells for $247. It's interviews with industry leaders. If you want to put a flyer in the goodie bags that you hand out to the participants, I'll split the revenue 50-50 with you. They paused, and then they said, Lisa, I don't know. But let me ask you, would you be willing, if we did this, would you be willing to attend the conference and speak for 5 minutes to explain the offer to everybody in attendance? Lisa paused 3 seconds for dignity, said thank you for asking, got in there, and lined up 45 appointments with potential clients as a result of that 5-minute speech, and made a little money from the sales. That wasn't the real objective. The real objective was the back end. But the strategy is called the fundraiser strategy. I've also worked where I call organizations up and they don't have a schedule or a budget or anything like that. And I said, well, I understand. I'm willing to waive my $5,000 speaking fee to do a fundraiser for you. And they'll say, a fundraiser, what's that? So I say, well, why don't we have an event? We'll both promote it. We'll charge an early bird price of $99. And after my travel costs, we'll split the proceeds 50-50. So I've made thousands of dollars in a day doing that. But more important, I signed up clients. So I average $10,000 a speaking event, either if I get it in cash or if I get it on the back end.
Wow, these are really solid gold tips that anyone can do. And I like that concept because so often there are all of these events and they want you to pay anywhere from a couple $1,000s to $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 to be a sponsor at an event. And I love the way you just turned that around and said, okay, here's a fundraiser. And then they come back with something to say, oh, well, yeah, you need to come and explain what this is, because they're definitely going to benefit. So I really like that. That's a really great idea too. It's, again, solid gold information. So Henry, you're really delivering on my promise to my listeners that I said they're going to walk away with some concrete information. So again, if you were to summarize what are the biggest 3 things that someone who's trying to use a book and be a speaker, what would you say are the top 3 things that they should be doing in today's world to market themselves?
Number 1 thing is to put on small scale seminars. I changed my world by putting on small scale seminars. I did not invent this. I got the idea from a professor at the Harvard Business School, and he didn't invent it. He got it from McKinsey Consulting. It's how they invented consulting and marketing for it. And it's doing something regular for your target-rich environment, a topic that they're interested in. It might be a lunch and learn. It might be a breakfast briefing. I go around the country doing marketing with a book and speech summits, which is a 3-hour program. So there's different formulas. It's like a combination lock. You've got to figure out the combination for your target audience. And the strategy works. If people don't come, then you don't have the right combination of topic or venue. But they come, and it's what happens as a result of that on the back end. So if I have 20 people attend my summit, I offer a no-cost 30-minute phone call. And it's a strategy call. I call it a book chat. And it's a no-selling zone. And I ask about their goals. I ask about what their assets are. And I don't mean money. I mean intellectual property. And then I ask about their roadblocks. And then I help them get clarity on how others have gotten from where they are to where they want to go. The more generous I am with those, the luckier I get in business. The second thing is you need to get in front of other people's audiences where they've gathered an audience. And as I mentioned, there are 16 different ways to commit the perfect crime of getting paid to market to people. So you need to do that. The third thing is to get published. And if you're a thought leader, then you speak and you write. And it's not one and done. I did a book and I'm waiting for the world to discover me. Nobody's going to discover you. Well, maybe somebody gets discovered. Also, somebody wins the lottery. But it's not a good retirement plan to put all your retirement money into lottery tickets. So it's not a good plan to just wait for the universe to find you. You need to go out, or in the Midwest, I say the Lord helps those who help themselves. In California, I have to say the universe manifests and rewards activity. So you have to be out there and get published. That's a spectrum. It starts with, are you using LinkedIn effectively as a blog site? Is there a new original article up there on LinkedIn? For me, I have graduated to, I am paid to write 7 columns a month for Forbes.com. And let me tell you, more people have read my Forbes columns than have read the 11 books I have written and published. So it's the power of that. And then in the blurb at the end, they always get to read that I'm an author and I do these things. And then my platform, my social media platform, has expanded so much after a year and a half of writing for Forbes. People find me because of that. So what could that be for you? What platform could you build and could you graduate up to? I started with a community paper, and then I wrote for CBS Money Watch and Inc.com and Forbes as a volunteer, and then Forbes as a paid columnist. So you march on up to those things. So those are the 3 things. To recap: small scale seminars, get on somebody's stage, and 3, get published on a regular basis.
Every single one of those is absolutely on target. And those are all things that I've personally worked on. My background is in media. I have a master's degree in mass communications, and I was a newspaper editor and a TV reporter. So I've just kind of merged my old school background with new media. So everything you're saying makes so much sense to become a thought leader in today's world, and also to create lots of income and impact, and of course have that influence. And I'm going to have to invite you back another time to talk more about your journey on how you became a Forbes correspondent, because I know a lot of people who are interested in how do you use publishing, blogs, or write for Inc., or go all the way up to Forbes. That could be an entire conversation, I think, in itself. So I'd love to have you come back another time to talk about how do you create that platform through publishing, and maybe dig a little deeper. You mentioned that you have 16 ways that you can make money through speaking and publishing. Is that part of your program, that where you teach this, or is that a book, or do you have?
I have a new book coming out called Client Attraction Chain Reaction. That'll be my new book for next year.
Oh, okay.
And it's covered in there. I also speak on it and write about it. The Forbes columns will take different parts of it. I'm always looking in those Forbes columns about how do you attract high-paying clients. So there's different angles to it. But that's also a topic. If you want to have me back, we can just talk just about the 16 ways.
Yeah, yes, I definitely want to do that. And it's interesting because I have several podcasts, and that's a whole nother avenue to talk about. But I first invited you to be on my show called Daily Success. But as we've talked, I'm thinking really our conversation lends itself more to the Thought Leaders show, because obviously you are a thought leader, and many of the people who listen are thought leaders. And it's just so amazing to me how you literally laid out the plan just in telling stories. I was thinking about how you talked about human beings being hardwired for stories. As you told a story and it illustrated, the point of your message, I was, visualizing the whole, I could see each one of those people and the problem that they have, and that how their problem was solved. And then even when you were describing, the path, it's like, I could go, there I am on the stage. I could put myself into your stories, which I think tells me that your examples are very powerful when I'm able to put myself into your story, and how it might be me doing all the things to become a success. So I always see myself as, if someone was taking a poll, I would be, one of representative of those 1,000 people in a poll. And I can see that the illustrations are so vivid when you do describe everything in your story. So everything that you've said is such a good example. And I highly recommend that everyone listening re-listen to this, because you really did outline specific steps to success to become a speaker and to become a best-selling author, and how to use authorship and publishing to grow your platform. So thanks a lot, Henry. I really got a lot out of our conversation today.
Thank you, Tammy. It was so great to be here and to share ideas how people can get in this race, get in the race to success. And you never arrive, but it's a great journey.
You're absolutely right about that. So before I let you go, if somebody wants to contact you, what is the best way for them to reach out to have that conversation with you?
Oh, thank you. Uh, two things I wanted to talk about real quick is one, since we've got a lot of authors and experts who listen to your podcast, maybe some would like to have Forbes write about them. So if you want to send me an idea for a column, my column is about marketing, promotion, publicity, public speaking, anything about attracting clients. Send an email to Henry, Henry, at Indie, INDIE, books, BOOKS, INTL.com. Also, you can use that email if you wanted to schedule one of those no-cost strategy calls, the book chat. Happy to do that. If you'd like to get on my weekly tip newsletter, I have a 2-minute tip I send out every week. You can go to my website, indiebooksinternational.com, and sign up. You can get off wherever you want. We don't sell the list. We don't spam people. I send you something once a week. And those are all different ways. And thank you for the kind words, too. I appreciate that.
Hey, I mean, the truth is I'm, like I said, I'm representative of a lot of people, and I'm like, my flash cubes, that really dates me. The light bulbs are going off in my head in all the different ideas that, because you are so good at outlining the steps to success. So I really appreciate that, because it makes it very easy for someone to say, oh, I could do that, just like, oh, have small events and, go from there and, grow it from this point to this point. And so that's, it's so easy to be excited about everything that you're talking about. So Henry, before I let you go, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, Tammy, I think there's a Forbes.com column or two in you. So we need to be talking about what you can share with that. And
I'll definitely do that. I definitely am interested in that, and I'd love to do that.
And then there's one more speaking idea that I encourage people to put on, a different kind of workshop or retreat. I do 3 retreats with authors a year, and it's a generosity-based workshop where you spend 3 days with me, just a dozen authors. We just work on these pragmatic action plans, and it's on a donation basis. So I ask for a $150 donation to hold your spot, but then you decide how much you can afford to pay and what it was worth to you at that time. So that's like letting the universe, karma, kismet take care of it. I talked to one person and they said, well, what prevents people from taking advantage of you? And I said, karma. And I thought his head was going to explode. He didn't have an abundance mindset. So the last thing I said is, have an abundance mindset. Generosity is our brand. What fuels all this is be generous with your information. And the more generous you are, the luckier you're going to get attracting high-paying clients.
Wow. Now that is a concept, and you truly are a thought leader. Like I said, Daily Success is just one of the shows that I produce, but Thought Leaders is another, and you definitely have shown yourself to be a thought leader. And, I think that is really good advice. And it's very interesting how if you did invite people, and again, $150 to save the seat, and then you work on this, and then how much is this worth to you? And I imagine that for some people, it could really be something extremely generous, because they would have such a huge breakthrough. That's another conversation that we'll have to have another time. So Henry, again, thank you so much. And everyone, I highly recommend that you listen to this show again and take copious notes, because Henry has revealed so much gold about how to become successful, not only in your business, but of course in life. So thank you so much, Henry. Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
You've been on the air, listening to Author Interview Radio. To get instant access to all the private author conversations, go to authorinterviewradio.com. Subscribe now.